Come join Greg and Richard right here on Talking Red.
A 1-0 defeat at home to Sunderland. Not the result we wanted, and it's now no win in Ange Postecoglou's first 5 matches in charge of Nottingham Forest. The ref had a shocker, but with Chris Wood off the boil, the replacements not clicking, along with more terrible defending from a set piece, just how long can we keep defending this team and this manager when they are simply not winning football matches? Having an abundance of chances is one thing, and actually scoring goals is entirely another, it seems. It's a results business. And already the patience of many Forest fans has worn thin, with some even calling for the Ange experiment to be terminated. Is that fair-dinkum, or is it simply a time for calm heads? I want to say welcome to you. This is Talking Reds, a Nottingham Forest podcast. I'm your host, Greg Oram. My co-host, Richard Spray, will be joining us very soon. But with us for the moment on the panel, we have the Statman, Danscape and Paul Morley, all ready for the Nottingham Forest versus Sunderland match review. And for Ange Postecoglou, is the clock ticking?
I can't afford to waste time.
Doy has a go, and it takes a deflection on its way through, and Bruce was relieved to see it go beyond the post.
I can't afford to waste time.
Good tackle though, and Jesus! And Hutchinson! Blocked by Roos.
Big. I can't afford to waste time.
Hutchinson's teasing ball in, Wood again! And from close range, he doesn't even test the keeper this time.
I can't afford to waste time. I can't afford to waste time. I can't afford to waste time.
It does sound rather ominous, and I'm not quite sure I intended it to be so ominous, and we are a positive channel. We try to make sure that we're balanced and fair, and that's how we're going to approach this next hour or so. But it does feel like, there is an element of people looking at the hourglass and people looking at their watches and people wondering, guys, just how long is it going to take? We're going to hopefully try and kind of bring some balance to the argument tonight. Obviously, this is going to be probably quite a heavy chat on Ange coming up, what we saw yesterday and so on. So get ready for some of that. We want to hear you guys in the comments thoughts as well. So please let us know if you're here. Let us know what you're thinking about the whole situation at the City Ground. And your thoughts on Ange Postecoglou. I want to kind of remind you that he's been in the club for 3 weeks, I think, is it now? I don't even know if it's that. It might even be 2 or 3. It's gone super quick. And so we're going to kind of break down everything that's happened and try and, just put as much of a positive spin on it as possible, but at the same time remaining grounded and being critical where we feel like we need to be. Danscape is with us and Paul Morley is with us as well. Thank you to you guys for being with us. As I said at the start, Richard Spray will be here very, very soon. We're going to get to Danscape and Paul very, very soon. But I want to start in a positive sense. All right. We had Michael Gallus get in touch with us. Now, he's the guy that you've all seen the pictures. He's the Australian chap that flew over from Melbourne, and he messaged me on Facebook on Saturday night, or rather Friday night, because we're going on Saturday, to say that I'm heading up, and he was super, super excited. He said, I hope I can meet Ange. And I said, I'm not quite sure you managed to do that, but good luck. And of course, he's had an interview with the local newspaper in Nottingham. He was mentioned on Sky. He met Ange. He's on the screen there. What an absolute legend. And it's just kind of, in many ways frames what I've been saying for a few weeks, that all of a sudden Forest have been inundated with more support from Australia, and Ange has got his own fan club. A set of disciples that are a good bunch. So welcome on board, Michael Gallus. We salute you for making the effort to get up to the City Ground and to see Ange's team. We're sad that it wasn't a win, of course, and hopefully you'll get to another game soon. So we salute you, Michael Gallus. I wanted to just highlight his participation this weekend in events. Danscape, I'll come to you first. I mean, look, thinking about the Sunderland match, we're going to kind of pick it apart. Let's get your general match thoughts, really, on how you were at the game. So it's I always say it's very different when you're watching it on TV is how you is when you're there. So give us your general match thoughts, and as I like to do, is got to tie in that team selection that was announced an hour and 15 minutes before kickoff. How did you see that?
It was a surprise. I suppose we knew there was going to be some rotation, and we were asking for rotation almost, weren't we, at the start of the season, that we were going to have a squad where we could do what we saw. Obviously, Dominguez starting in midfield was the big surprise, as opposed to Yates, Sangare, who were presumably available, but not I don't know, not picked for some reason. And I think that does then raise the question marks before kickoff a little bit. The atmosphere was a bit of one of those games where, after kickoff, it's a case of, right, the team had to show something to the crowd to get it going, and that obviously never kind of happened. But I think overall thoughts on the game was kind of what we expected. We said about Sunderland being tough to beat, low block, all that sort of stuff, and they set up and we kind of played their game. I was surprised by our kind of lack of intensity in that first 10 minutes or so to really get at them and try and upset the rhythm a bit. And then later in the game, I was surprised in the second half, after obviously we'd gone behind and all the stuff we'll get into, I was sort of surprised that there wasn't that reaction in the second half to try and recover it. It sort of felt too inevitable as the game went on, even though we didn't play terribly. There was no points where I thought we were that bad, but we just never showed enough that it felt like we were ever really going to get back in the game, unfortunately for me. So yeah, a bit of a flat one of those games that you kind of want to forget. If you win it 1-0, or you just kind of, you don't really want to remember it too much. But unfortunately, I think we're going to talk about it because we have to. You're on mute, Greg.
I've done it again because I'm struggling with a bit of a cough at the moment, guys. So I'm muting myself in between, so I'm not being heard, basically. So yeah, Paul, 5 changes. Was that too many for you? Because I made the argument in the week that I wanted to see Hutchinson start, maybe McAtee getting a game, because this might be the game that he gives Gibbs White a rest. We've been kind of calling for Gibbs White to be rested a little bit. I didn't see Dominguez starting. I don't think anyone really saw that coming because we thought he'd be eased back in. But it was 5 changes in total. Was 5? I mean, look, I guess I'm asking you with the power of hindsight. But at the time when the team came out, did you kind of wince and think, 5 changes is a bit too much? And give us your general match thoughts as well, Paul.
Yeah, I didn't wince, but I did raise my eyebrows a little bit. So Dominguez was obviously the one that nobody expected. And on the one hand, massive positive that he's deemed ready to start games again, because he's, we know what he can bring, and particularly in a high pressing team that Ange wants to be, he potentially over the next 4, 5, 6 weeks and for the rest of the season can be a real asset. Now he's fit, but it did seem a little bit strange to whack him straight in for a start after, obviously after being nowhere near anything for the last few weeks. I know he's theoretically on the bench on Wednesday, but I think pretty much everybody who's in the squad is on the bench in those European games. So yeah, that was a surprise. Like you say, in hindsight, easy to sort of say that it didn't work out. I mean, Jesus and Wood was one that ahead of the Betis game, I was sort of, I'm on record as saying that I think Jesus is a better player to start against Betis, but also with a view that helps Wood, because Sunderland feels like a Wood game. So it's difficult for me to sit here and be too critical of the changes that he made. I mean, Gibbs White and McAtee. I mean, Gibbs White. I think it's unfortunate that Gibbs White's form has been a little bit indifferent, because it is kind of heaped more pressure on McAtee to deliver so early in his Forest career than ideally we probably would have wanted. But that said, fair enough to give him a go. I think the same for Betis game, and in the end it worked out okay. But I think not starting Hudson-Odoi, not for Betis, for Burnley, and for this game, the 2 Premier League games in a row, to go with 2 relatively inexperienced Premier League wingers, for me was not ideal. I would have started Hudson-Odoi against Sunderland. But yeah, look, it's easy with hindsight, as you say. It just felt to me like, to come to the game, like one of those games where, and it's difficult to describe the feeling, but you get the feeling that you know, however many chances you come, you just don't believe that it's going to go in the back of the net. And I think when Wood headed that one over, I think it was Williams' cross after 35 minutes, it just felt like, oh, this is going to be one of those days where we don't quite click, and no matter how many chances we have, what chances we have, it's never going to go in, and so it proves. So, yeah, tough one to take. What does that mean for Ange? I mean, I think for me, irrespective of what you think about the other games and how much importance you place on, at Arsenal and Swansea and whatever, this was by far and away for me the poorest result we've had since he's arrived. So we need a big turnaround on Thursday to help him and help everybody out, I think.
Yeah, I think so as well. And we're going to get into the Ange kind of side of the chat very, very soon. But I mean, on the game, I think I'm with you. I wanted Wood to start against Sunderland. And I know a lot of people were quite different in that they thought, well, look, Igor Jesus is the guy in form. He scored 2 goals against Betis. Why wouldn't you start him? I'm trying to see the value and the logic in this squad game that we've got and us having that depth, And so therefore, as you just said, I felt Sunderland was a perfect game for Chris Wood. Having not got any minutes in midweek, it felt like he was being kept back for that. And, has he been brilliant this season? Well, we got off to a flyer against Brentford and we all thought we're off and running now. And I think the whole club has gone through turmoil since then with the Nuno situation, and it's brought uncertainty and it's brought maybe players not quite sure where they're going to fit and new playing styles come into play. Let's not forget, guys, that Ange Postecoglou comes into Nottingham Forest as a manager that's never worked with any of these players before. So for those listening and watching thinking Ange should be waving his magic wand and getting wins on the board, just bear that in mind that it takes time. And we've seen the green shoots, as I've been saying over and over again, of that happening. And we saw it definitely against Swansea and definitely against Burnley. Betis we know about. And so the question that I'm going to be asking you guys throughout this pod is how long can we keep going on talking about the chances that we've had, but also the fact that we're failing to convert them? And just how good as well have those chances really been? How clear cut and when you look back on the games against Burnley and you look back against Swansea and so on, and yesterday, I can't think of too many that were, oh my God, how on earth have you missed that? The Wood one yesterday, the header from Omari Hutchinson's cross, that to me was an oh my God moment. How have you missed that? Other chances for me were a little bit 50-50, if I'm honest with you. A little bit everyone's lauding the goalkeeper yesterday. And everyone lauded Dubravka. They made good saves, but a lot of those saves are kind of saves that I'd expect a lot of goalkeepers to make as well. They weren't, off the top of my head, I think Dubravka made one that I thought was really, really good. But other saves that were, saves I think he should be making. So I guess why I'm saying all this is I'm kind of putting it into the mix that, yes, there have been chances. And on another day, you get 3 or 4 of those. But are we looking in the wrong area? Are we looking at the wrong area of the pitch? Should we be looking more at the defence? Because that really was the problem yesterday. So that takes us straight through to thinking about the incident with Dominguez, because Dominguez comes into the starting 11, and it's the incident surrounding Dominguez where it all kind of happens. Richard Spray, my co-host in Oklahoma, has joined us. Can you hear us, Richard? How are you doing?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, but I've got him. 1 second. There we go. I can't have you down there. I need you there.
I'm sorry. Yeah,
my equilibrium is thrown. So Richard's just joined us. I was just kind of like filling a little bit because I knew you were coming into the studio, and so want to get your thoughts, Richard, overall on the game yesterday, and I want you to kind of take us into the Dominguez incident and how you saw that, because obviously we're biased Forest fans. But what did you think? Was Dominguez touched? Did he overdo it? Was he diving? Was he simulating?
I mean, it's not above anyone, I think, on the pitch, no matter who the player is. Maybe Jesus is a little bit different. He's kind of hardwired different, right? He'll get knocked down. If typically he gets taken down, it's because he's actually gotten taken down and then he pops right back up, which most footballers don't, right? They can get a deft touch and then go down. So it's not unusual for any footballer to do that. There may have been a little bit of that. I definitely think there was some contact, but not like I don't know. I think the referee had let incidents go prior to that, and then it's just unfortunate that Dominguez is one of the next guys to kind of come up that kind of fell into the quote unquote what sort of looked like a dive scenario. So the referee decided to make an example, which is unfortunate because, as we know, the outcome of that. So didn't agree with it. I thought it was a little over-egged on the part of the referee, but it is what it is at this point, I guess. But in terms of the overall match, I mean, I thought we do what we've been doing, which is creating opportunities, putting ourselves in position to score goals, and just that execution and that industry in the box and in the final third at certain intervals as well doesn't seem to be present. It's just weird seeing similar players who I know at the end of last season maybe struggled a bit, Wood being kind of one of those guys, not be as clinical as we're used to seeing. And so that is frustrating. And then it's like a similar pattern. I think Dan talked about this and may have already talked about this, about the way that the defenses looked frail for a lot longer than we probably remember. I think, Dan, you had said the metrics in terms of opportunities given up, it seems like that's been going on since about Liverpool, where we drew 1-1 towards the latter third of the season. And so it's kind of an unfortunate pattern that's continued. We're missing obviously key critical players in that area of the pitch, and not having Aina on the right, not having Nico on the left, because we know he's much more of a has more dimension to his game than Zinchenko. But I definitely think it was like anything that we do, and this is kind of probably common for anything in the Premier League, when you switch off even for a millisecond, you get punished. And it just feels like that's what happened towards the end of last season. That's what happened this season. But it feels like we should be winning these matches. I can't completely ignore what Ange said, and I do tend to kind of agree with them. It's just, unfortunately, we just got to do it. We've got to get through it, and we've got to find a way to put the ball in the back of the net more consistently when those moments come, even half chances, because we did play above our XG quite a bit last season. It just feels like we're playing below our XG this season.
Danscape, how much were the players rattled by the referee's decision to give a free kick against us and show Dominguez a yellow card? Because it felt like they were all over the place, what it looked like, and evidently they were, because he crept round the back and he popped it in the net. Should Sales be doing better with that as well, do you reckon?
Yeah, I've not watched it back loads because it's depressing, so I've not bothered. But at the time, I think they had a similar free kick. Yeah, I think they had a similar free kick not long before, and they did the exact same thing. They chipped it to the back post, and that one, there was a bit of a tussle between Wood and the attacker, because I think they checked it on VAR, didn't they? So it was we knew what was coming. They were definitely riled up by the refereeing decision, which was just bonkers, really. It's like a new rule all of a sudden to award a free kick for that kind of thing in that area of the pitch. So they were riled up by it, you could see it, but at the same time, it's almost like they defended it differently. Like on the other one, they dropped quite quickly, and Wood was tussling with the defender. And on the second time, it was like they tried to hold the line and let the attackers go, and obviously misjudged it and got it wrong. And then, Sells needs to read it a bit quicker so that he's closer to spread and kind of control, that zone as much as he can, I guess. But other than that, I actually don't think our defense did anything wrong. They didn't really create a lot. We didn't make many mistakes, I don't think. There's the odd little thing like giving away a corner, Zinchenko or whatever early on, but nothing that really brought any pressure on us until we were chasing the game. And then I think Gertrude had that one where he ran through. But other than that, it wasn't actually a game where I was sort of sat there worrying that our defense was a problem until the sort of head loss around that set piece. And then after that, like I say, it was more the fact that it just never felt like we were going to get back into it, as opposed to us feeling vulnerable to them getting a second goal.
Okay. I mean, they weren't really creating much, Paul. I mean, they had an early opportunity that I think it was Isidore that got a swipe on it. There was a bit of a mix-up. Dominguez to get involved and couldn't get his feet sorted out. So, there was a kind of a bit of an alarm bell moment, but it was the goal that kind of, it was the pivotal moment, because I didn't really like our response thereafter as well in the first half. I didn't kind of feel like that Forest did anything really up until the half-time mark. Were you surprised to see the change made at half-time with Dominguez coming off and Gibbs White coming on? Or did you think that was a change that was needed at that point? Still there?
I am just about. I did lose most of that question. So
I was just talking about the change made at half. Yeah, you froze. Just talking about the change at half time. Gibbs White coming on for Dominguez. It felt like Dominguez wasn't going to last much longer. Was that the change that you thought was necessary?
Yeah, I mean, I think I said at the beginning, Dominguez was a surprise inclusion for me. That if you think he's only fit to play 45, then I probably wouldn't have started him. So, but I said good positive that he's back in the fold. Yeah, I mean Gibbs White. I think the one thing that you can't accuse Ange of yesterday is not going to his bench. He was very proactive in the changes that he made. You could argue that it led to a little bit of a chaotic sort of, team on the pitch and a little bit of a lack of structure. And it kind of got to sort of 60, 65 minutes. And it almost felt like we were playing, it felt like the desperation of injury time we were just kind of, there was a lot of panic. And I think that comes back to confidence. I've got going back 35 years ago, I was a half decent striker. And in order to be in a place where you convert your chances, you need to be confident and calm. And I think the calmness was the one thing that we've been lacking. Apart from Igor Jesus, I separate him from that. Generally, in the final third, in the last couple of weeks, we just seem to be trying too hard, and that's sort of leading to a little bit of a rush of blood and it's just sort of a lack of composure, which filters into the stands. It makes you think that we're never going to score, and that filters back out onto the pitch, and it's this sort of vicious circle of lack of belief in what's about to happen. As soon as the ball goes into the box, that you just think, and you mentioned it before. Yeah, the keeper made some decent saves, but probably saves that you'd expect him to make. Having said that, probably since the Burnley game and even the Swansea game, we must have created, 10, 15 chances that you would think, 6 times out of 10 would end up in the back of the net, and we've managed to convert 2 or 3. So, we're way down on whereas last year for 15 chances at 6 times out of 10, we were converting 10 and 11 of those. And it's really difficult to put your finger on. And you just hope that the law of averages means that whether it's Midtjylland or somebody else in the next couple of weeks, everything sticks and everything hits the back of the net, and that's what we need almost just to turn the tide. And as soon as we get to a game where we score 2 or 3 and win comfortably, then everyone starts believing, and the next game just the confidence flows again. Someone gets in that situation like Wood did, or like Hutchinson did when he robbed the ball and gave it to Jesus and it bounced back to him. Just those sort of situations where a bit of composure and the ball ends up in the back of the net and you don't give the keeper a chance to make a good save. So, yeah, like I say, difficult to put the finger on. Coming back to your original question about the substitution, I thought it was a good move to shake it up. I say maybe it was a sort of nod to the fact that he maybe got the original selection a little bit wrong, and the rest of the substitutions I thought were all fair. It just led to a bit of lack of cohesion on the pitch, and again, ultimately, that sort of panic sort of feeling in the final third that meant that we struggled to obviously get that final killer instinct and get back in the game.
I think I said it in our chat. It felt to me like the old guard were going to be needed because I wanted Hudson-Odoi on, I wanted Gibbs White, and I wanted Sangare on. I kind of felt like we had Richard, McAtee, we had Bakwa, we had Ndoye, and it's been a case that we've spoken about the wingers quite a lot, and who plays and where they play, which side they play, what combination plays. And Paul touched on Hudson-Odoi doesn't start against Burnley. He doesn't start against Sunderland. He starts in the week and has a good game at Betis. So are we getting an insight into how Ange is seeing his squad in terms of where he plays them? Or is it a case of, listen, it's too early in the season now to start thinking about, I'm going to make changes for that. Just get your best team on the pitch. And if they put in a bloody good performance like they did against Betis, then you play the same 11 in 4 days' time. And you make your changes accordingly. And if some of them are looking knackered after 55 minutes, you get them off and off we go again. So, is he overthinking it potentially in your eyes? Could that be the case? He's trying to get a look at everyone. So I want you to also then give me your thoughts on Bakwa. So I'm kind of coming to you for Bakwa as your guy. I'm going to come to Dan for Dan and Ndoye. So that'll be your next bit in a minute, Dan. So is Ange overthinking it in terms of selection, Richard? And your thoughts on delaying Bakwa?
About to say, I think Back was probably Dan's guy too, but he was so adept at the scouting. But yeah, I get you because I have been a fan. That's right. He's removing himself from any sort of association. Okay, start with Bakwa. I think it kind of and this could be the same for Dan and Doy. Maybe Dan, our Dan, sees it differently. But I would say that it's reminiscent of what you probably are feeling if you're Chelsea when you're looking at Madueke in early days. It's probably reminiscent of what we felt when we were looking at what Elanga was doing, because the number of offsides that first season he played for us was ridiculous. He couldn't control when to utilize that pace. As he started to get more confident with that, then he started to, struggle a little bit with finishing, being just going at players and using that pace to his advantage. I mean, there's a number of mental things from a decision-making standpoint that he struggled with. And so I think Bakwa, to me, from a raw material standpoint, has a pretty high ceiling. And it's just a matter of getting accustomed to I know we say this a lot and we use this probably as an excuse too frequently, but it is the case. The French Ligue 1 is a great league. And I mean, look at PSG, look at some of these teams. But when you're someone like him playing for Strasbourg, who's a good team, not, spectacular team, when you're now moving into a situation that does have it's a bit of a turnstile in terms of who's playing and who isn't. There's a lot of games you got to sort out, all these stuff that Ange is trying to deal with that Nuno would have had to have been getting somewhat accustomed to, even though he had seen it with Wolves. It's still going to be a difficult prospect for him to get there and accelerate. You see the flashes, right? It's the inconsistency of that is going to happen as a young player, especially a young player in the Premier League. So I have no concern that Bakwa at some point will become a very, very effective player for us, just in the same way that we at times gave up on Elanga too quickly and didn't allow ourselves to be more patient with him. And as we did, we saw the end result. He was spectacular last season. So I do tend to see it similarly with Bakwa. Is it frustrating during the process? Yeah, it's frustrating. But at the same time, I want to keep a cool head when it comes to that, because I do believe in what our recruiting has done. And I think the other piece was, overthinking it. I'm trying to put it myself and project myself into his position. When you're still only 2 weeks into your tenure, it's got to still be challenging to know, because how much time has he really been able to digest the opposition, to know how to play against them in European competition? He certainly knows the Premier League, but I do think he's tinkering a little bit too much during live matches. we don't have the privilege of seeing what he does on the training pitch to understand where his mind comes from and where these decisions are coming from. Again, you got to make in moment, real-time decisions as a manager, as we all know, to react to the situation, as well as, because sometimes the plan just goes out the window, right? But I do think there are times where maybe he is tinkering a bit, but I also can give him a little bit of grace with that, because he just hasn't had a lot of time. Maybe that's just me being too naive, but he knows he's got talented players. It's what situations dictate the utilization of them, what rotations make sense without losing continuity. I mean, that's not an easy thing to navigate. I would imagine. Again, I'm not a Premier League manager. I've never been a manager of anything related to football in my life, but I can speak as a leader in other areas that it is kind of hard sometimes to know, until you get to understand the depths and see how they react to situations and how they manage themselves in game. You're going to be hard pressed to know exactly how they're going to function. And then you just got to see how that unfolds to a degree and play the hot hand, to your point about Jesus, right? We all love Chris Wood, but I was pushing for the idea that I thought Jesus should be back in, because he's the only guy who seems to be able to know what to do to get the ball in the net at this point. And Paul referenced that a minute ago. So yeah, maybe a little bit of overthinking of it, but I'm gonna caveat it with a little bit of grace about what the situation is and what he's got to figure out with all of this football coming thick and fast, and trying to navigate that and manage that effectively.
I guess when I was talking about Wood, I still kind of stand by me wanting him to start against Sunderland, because I have faith in him. He scored a lot of goals for us last season, but there is something to be said for the guy in form. And if he's coming off the back of being high in midweek from putting the ball in the back of the net twice away at Real Betis, then Igor Jesus, you perhaps want to let him run again. Danscape, coming to you for Dan and Doy. Paul, I'm going to ask you to think about James McAtee in a moment. So I want your thoughts on him. But Dan and Doy's getting a little bit of flack, not least from me, actually, Dan, because I want more from him. I feel like I said in the chat, we're getting 3/4 of the job done. He's taking players on. He holds the ball quite well, but his end product seems a bit lacking at the moment. Is that fair?
Maybe. I mean, obviously there is no end product, so yeah, it is lacking. Just jumping quickly back on Bakwa, he signed for us on the 1st of September. That was the day after we played West Ham at home. So his only time at the City Ground was to do a photo shoot, and then he's not actually. Yeah, so I think we've got to give him a little bit more time to acclimatise. Although that comes back to the manager picking him on the back of like a good 10 minutes here or there rather than keeping him as a sub, but that's a different matter. On Ndoye, look, I thought in that first half, from sitting in the Trent end, looking down at him at the far end of the pitch, doing what he was doing, I thought he was doing what people wanted him to do last week, which was take his man on, and he went past his man 2 or 3 times from what I remember. You know, he one touch and gone, he was gone past him. But yeah, I get what you're saying is that a few times he then checks back and looks for a pass inside. But I mean, I don't think that's because he doesn't know how to cross, if you know what I mean. Like he will know how to cross the ball. So if he's thinking that the best decision is to cross the ball, then I'm sure he will. And if he's not, he's thinking that, well, actually what our game plan is to build around the box, which, to be fair, we did a lot last season with Hudson-Odoi. Like, we weren't a team that used to just chuck the ball in the box. We used to get into those wide areas and corners and then cut back and build and try and find other ways into the area. So I don't know. I'm not... But as I look at Dan Ndoye as a player, I'm still happy with what we've got because I think he's got the right attitude. I think he tries to do the right thing. He does the right thing for the team. And I just think if you can put him into a more settled side, which is the same with so many of our players, and you can give him a clear role and you can actually probably get him on the training pitch, which we haven't seen because we know we've been playing away from home and it's been game after game after game. I think there's a player in there that will deliver us, you know, what we need as a team, as a squad player, as a starter. So I'm not too concerned with it. I just think, you know, it's just part of the chaos that we're seeing. We're going through this phase of like, if someone has a good 10 minutes, we're like, well, they've got to start the next game. And I think we should be the other way around. We should be like, this is our team. And this guy has to keep performing for those 10 minutes to force his way in. And we're just not at that point. We're at the point where we're changing everything. And I guess given the context around this game, you do have to question Ange's selection because he's made all these changes knowing that anything other than a win in this game was going to get really seriously questioned. And so, you know, you do have to sort of think, well, was that, again, hindsight, but was it a wise choice? And does it show that we are massively prioritizing the next game, potentially?
I think you make some very good points there. And I'm all in favour of the team being the team and those that are new to the club, such as Dylan Bakwa, such as James McAtee, such as Murray Hutchinson, having to bide their time and get minutes off the bench, be it last 10, last 15, last 20 minutes, and making that impact. And slowly but surely, you make your impact. You become acclimatized to your teammates until it becomes so difficult that to leave you out that you have to start. It feels like we are turning quite quickly to these players. And, Bakwa, look at him. He's really good. He's skipped past that player at Swansea and skinned him alive. Let's get him in the next team. And I was guilty of that as well because that's what we do. So I think you make some good points about, you know, Hudson-Odoi for me should start every game at the moment. He's our best winger, our most experienced winger. Him on the left. Maybe Ndoye is the one that starts on the right. And they're the ones that start every game. And you keep them fresh by bringing the finishers on. James McAtee, Paul, did he take his chance yesterday? Because, you know, we've talked about Gibbs White's form being a bit indifferent. I felt actually that James, I'll let you answer, but I felt like we missed Morgan. And when he came on, it was noticeable that he was on the pitch.
Yeah, I think so. Look, as I said a bit earlier, I think McAtee is definitely, look, from what we've seen from him, from the flashes that he's shown, he's got real talent, and you know that's not a dispute from my perspective. I don't think it's a dispute from anybody. I think we've been led to the point where, because of Morgan's indifferent form, you know, he's the supposed next cab off the rank at number 10, and therefore we expect him to start producing the goods from day one, which I think is a little bit unfair. At this stage of not just his Forest career, but his football career in general. You know, I mean, yes, he was with Anderson at the under-21s. He was captain of that. But he didn't play a huge amount for Man City. I know he's played a lot for Sheffield United. The Championship is completely different football. So look, I'm all for giving McAtee time. I think it's just too early to make any definitive call on the vast majority of these players. You know, I'd include Bakwa and Ndoye in that. I think just coming back to Ndoye's probably played the most minutes of all the new guys, I think, so far, certainly in league games. And he's a moments player. He's shown in the first couple of games that he's got moments in him. Probably not shown enough moments to fully convince me yet, but, you know, I certainly wouldn't write him off. And Bakwa feels like somebody who, as you said, at this stage is more of a let's make an impact off the bench kind of player. And obviously starting against Swansea was probably right, and maybe even starting in on Thursday against Midtjylland might be a game that suits him. But yeah, I think McAtee. I think what we need ideally is Morgan to really have a great. If Morgan starts on Thursday, let's say, have a really good game. Take the ball by the horns, own back that number 10 shirt, and that will just take a bit of pressure off McAtee, and he can be again someone who eases in 5-10 minutes here and there. And maybe start against someone like Malmo or someone like that in the next couple of weeks that he is eased in, and Morgan takes the burden of that role over the next sort of month or two. And McAtee, and also as we know, he can do a job wide as well. I mean, that's one thing we haven't really seen him deployed as yet is somebody who can play a wide role as well. So if Back was not having a great game, I know we've brought Callum Window on in that role at Burnley. Maybe that's an option we might try with McAtee as well in the coming weeks to get him more minutes if Morgan starts producing. So yeah, a lot up in the air. I think he is someone, as I said on a couple of podcasts before, who really excites me. McAtee, I think in the long term he can do great things for the club, but we just need to give him a bit of time to bed in. And like I say, hopefully Morgan starts producing and takes a bit of pressure off him.
One player that I'm keen to get more minutes is Amari Hutchinson. I talked about that in the previous show. I talked about the fact that he's not in the Europa League squad, so therefore he can't play on Thursday coming up. He couldn't play in the game at Betis. So when he came on, I was really happy that he came on, and I was really happy with what I saw from him. I thought he was one of the positives from last night. The way he skipped round their fullback at one point was really good to see. It did look like he was offering more than Backward offered in the whole time he'd been on the pitch. He is the one that put in that cross for Wood, who should have scored that header. I hate to say it, because scoring goals is the hardest thing, and Clough used to beat on about it all the time. You can miss him from a yard, 5 yards, or whatever it is. But Chris Wood should have scored that. And Hutchinson, again, like you say, nicked the ball in the box, and Jesus had the shot, and he had the shot. He looked interested, he looked lively, and there was some intensity about his play. And you were talking before, Paul, about it felt like for 25, 30 minutes, like there was that kind of, we were in injury time, frantically trying to get a goal. I'll be honest with you, I felt that as well, although I didn't mind that so much, because I liked the energy and I liked the intensity of what they were doing. But it was just some of the decision making was just letting them down, maybe because they were just a little bit too frantic. So it's about bringing that energy, bringing that intensity, but just having that clear head to make sure the pass is right and make sure you're making the right opportunity. Igor Jesus comes on, and we see him kind of playing off Chris Wood as well, which again is another option for us to have. And so, he had a header again, didn't he? He is very good with his head. So there's lots to be positive about in terms of this Nottingham Forest team. Well, a quick word for Sunderland, if I may. I thought they did to us in many, many ways what we did to teams last season. Graham Falk, who was the chap I went on to the WTF Sunderland podcast, WhatsApped him last night just to say, you know what, fair play, you guys won, and enjoy your win. And I'm sure you'll stay up. And he was quick to say, look, do you think we'll stay up? I said, yeah, on that performance, you guys have got no problem. So any Sunderland fans tuning in, fair play. Congratulations. You took the win. On another day, I think we score three goals and it's a different game. But that's not how football works. Football's a results game. It's about the goals that go in and not the ones that don't. So that leads us on to the next part of what we want to talk about. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about where we go from here. And we're going to break down the games that we've had so far. And are we being too harsh on Ange Postecoglou to expect so much so quickly? Join us after this break.
The Cheese Trader, based on Grape Lane in York, is a cheese lover's paradise. Home to some wonderful specialty cheeses, relishes and chutneys, and also with a fantastic street food menu. Try their loaded fries or posh cheese on toast. It'll be the best you've ever had. Owned by Forest fan Stu Freestone, the Cheese Trader proudly sponsors Talking Reds. Quote Talking Reds every time to get 10% off your order. The Cheese Trader and Talking Reds, the perfect cheesy mix.
Everyone knows about the cheese. You know where to find it. In York, the cheese trader, 10% discount available when you quote Talking Reds. All right. Before we get into that Ange chat, in fact, it's worth mentioning that the other big news of the weekend was the appointment of a certain Nuno Espirito Santo to be the new manager of West Ham United. And so Nuno takes over after Graham Potter was sacked. And JJ Dunn is in the comments, and he says, "Hey guys, are we going to talk about Nuno and being appointed at West Ham?" Well, yeah, here it is. We are in danger, guys, of Nuno going to Everton tomorrow, and of course, when West Ham beat Everton, which undoubtedly they now will, they will go above Nottingham Forest, and that will put Forest undoubtedly, without fail, into the bottom three. So the footballing gods are meddling and having their moment. There it is. It's a bit bigger. Forest sits 17th in the table. And I kind of feel like they're bashing my balls a little bit because I'm the one that's been going around for the last week saying, oh, yeah, I'll take 17th now if you give me a European trophy. I kind of feel like they're playing with me and toying with me as well. So, yeah, we expect fully that Nuno will start to do things at West Ham. And as Paul said, I think in our WhatsApp group, it will be interesting, really, to gauge how West Ham do in the next 5 or 6. Keep an eye on West Ham and what Nuno does with them. And then we'll get an idea about how quickly or not a manager can come in and start to turn things around at a club. And JJ Dunn is a regular listener, watcher of Talking Reds. And he got in touch with us recently to say that his dog Milo is also a big fan of Talking Reds. And JJ plays the Talking Reds channel on his TV. And every time he does, we get this.
Amazing.
We've got a fan. I love it.
It's amazing.
Mine and the dog howling away to the Garibaldi Bard and our theme tune. Absolutely fantastic. JJ Dunn and Milo, thank you so much for sending that in. It made us laugh. And listen, we need some laughs at the moment. We need to be smiling more than anything else. Richard Spray, are we being harsh to Ange Postecoglou? Because look, let's take the Swansea game out of the equation. Forget the Swansea game. Let's take the Betis game out of the equation. Let's just focus on the Premier League. And when we focus on the Premier League, Ange has been in charge of Nottingham Forest for 3 games. But we're also going to forget the Arsenal game. Because the Arsenal game was literally in a heartbeat of him taking over. He couldn't do nothing in that game. So we're forgetting the Arsenal game. So in the Premier League, he's really been in charge of Forest for 2 matches, in my eyes.
With any real opportunity to set things up.
In the Premier League. Yeah. The Arsenal game, I'm forgetting about. I'm writing it off. That to me was not even anything to do with Ange. That was just the way it was. He could have taken over on the Sunday. It wouldn't be on his record. I lauded him for taking over beforehand and being brave, but that's by the by. Let's forget that. He's been in charge properly for Burnley away and properly for Sunderland at home. And when we break it down like that, are we expecting too much from him now?
Yes.
I've been too helpful for him to write off those games.
Yeah, probably. No, I've been kind of a component of this too. I mean, maybe it's just this sort of like I've supported teams my whole life that tend to be kind of in the doldrums, either perpetually or in intervals, and so I kind of am accustomed to trying to find hope where there probably isn't any at certain points. But I definitely think there is hope. I think you're seeing some progress. I worry, when he kind of said what he said about we probably should have won the last 4 games. There's certain aspects of that statement that I would agree with. I'm not just saying it that diminishes or reduces the angst or the frustration about not getting the results, because we all understand in sports to this level, if you don't get results, you don't keep your job. But I would say that it is very early days for him. I think a lot of managers, Paul may have brought this up. Others I know have brought it up on X. I think Dan was right. I think he was the one who said about the 5 to 6 games with Nuno to see what happens and see how what he does with that West Ham. Because I'm sure they're going to be giving him a little bit of flexibility and understanding that it's a difficult task. Especially considering he's doing something similar coming right in on a Monday. Yeah, I feel like we're being a bit too punitive too quickly. Maybe that's just me being naive. I don't think it's being a happy clapper though to try to put things in context and try to give people a little bit of license, because while I understand what he did at Tottenham, and there are elements that reflect similar things that happen just in these first couple of Premier League matches, I think, and I don't know what the defining line is. Like, where do you go? Okay, by this point, he's either still here or not here. A lot of people want you to be that definitive, right? Declarative, but I don't know what that looks like per se, but I do think we need to be a little bit more flexible with the situation. I just think it's a bit of a hangover to not making Champions League. Then you follow with late recruiting, all of the stuff that happened. I think, Greg, you wrote out a beautiful list about this in WhatsApp that really articulated the chronology of how this has affected us as Forest fans, right? And so there is somewhat of a cumulative effect that's going on with all of that stuff, because here we are on the precipice of our first season in Europe for 30 years, getting a manager that we all believe in and we're completely behind. And then it feels like the foundation starts to crumble a little bit again. And I understand that's the Forest way, but it does feel like decisions are being made, whether it be by Nuno, by Edu, or whomever, to affect these situations. And it does get frustrating. So I recognize that managers always become the savior and the villain, right? And depending on the situation, but I think we do need to back off just a hair and allow the man the opportunity, because you hope, as we've long said, that he's going to learn from this. He's going to progress from his mistakes, because failure can be just as important as success. And it's I heard once the definition of success is going from failure to failure with no loss of enthusiasm. Okay. Forest fans are used to being down there in sort of areas of failure. When Cooper came in, when Nuno even came in, it was a very difficult time, with points deductions looming and all that. So I think we just need to back off just slightly to give the man a chance to actually imprint some things, learn from his mistakes, figure out how to deploy his team, and set them up for success, because he has had success in the past, albeit not in the Premier League. I get it, but his first season even at Tottenham, he did well, and so we've got to trust that there's going to be some turnaround here, I hope.
So there's lots of people that are kind of thinking, get rid of Ange now. I'm not sure that I can subscribe to that. I think that would just be too much of a maverick move. And it's just not going to happen. Marinakis is not going to turn around now and say, I've made a mistake. I just don't see it happening. And as you touched on, Rich, I kind of wrote to you how I saw the last 6 weeks or so, or longer. I mean, our best season in years qualifying for Europe. Everyone was happy. Everyone was excited for the season. Everyone was buoyed up. It was an amazing performance on the opening day, and a win versus Brentford, and everyone thinks, right, we kicked on and Nuno's our manager and off we go into Europe. It's going to be brilliant. And then all the Nuno stuff, all the press conferences, all the words start coming out and all the uprest. Everyone started thinking, what's going on? It's out of the blue. It's kind of knocking the stuffing out of the fans. And all of a sudden we had that confusion and worry starting to creep in out of nowhere. No one expected this. This was supposed to be the best season ever following last year. This was supposed to be, oh my God, we're in Europe. It's going to be amazing. Then there was the West Ham defeat, and then it was Nuno out the door. And it was really a case of none of us really knew what on earth was going on. More emotion, more confusion for the fans. Ange appointed within 12, 13 hours. And then we start to see a bit of a split. Is it a huge split? I don't know, but a bit of a split in the fan base. Then we have Swansea. I mean, I've skipped over Arsenal because I'm forgetting Arsenal. Then we have Swansea, which, again, we're looking back on it in a negative sense because of the capitulation. We have the missed chances versus Burnley. And, of course, Betis. The media are turning the screw. Social media are talking about Ange doesn't want a game. Fans are starting to panic because this is not what was supposed to happen. This was not how the script was written. And, of course, we had the defeat yesterday, all the fallout, fans losing their fucking minds, and it looks and feels shit. It's time for clear heads, guys, because when you lay it all like that, the emotion of fans is coming into play, Danscape, and everyone's starting to lose their mind. There's a chap who's in the comments, and I'm going to put it up. He's written quite a few. Not a Forest fan, clearly. Nearsighted remembrance. You're not a Forest fan, clearly, because you can't even spell Forest. And you like to say, Forest is 17th, but you guys are excusing Ange. We're not excusing Ange. We're discussing the situation as closely and as best we can as Forest fans. It's very easy for us to kind of lose our shit. And as fans, we want to lose our minds and we want to lose it. But ultimately, we have to try and break it down as best we can and get an understanding, Dan. So how do you see it? I mean, managers need to be given time, surely, but does it get to a point? Let's say that we don't pick up a point at Midtjylland, or it's only a point. We've got to go Newcastle next Sunday. Then we've got to play Chelsea. Could this go from looking not great to pretty bad quite quickly, do you think?
It could. Yeah, it could. Smile through it and just grin and bear it, I think, for the next few games. Potentially, there's some tough fixtures. I think you've got to give him an international break. You've got to give him some time between games to prove something, because it is just... I said it before, it's not really his doing. It's not really the players doing. The situation has been that we had to appoint someone as manager, and he's the guy who's ended up in probably the worst scenario you could want as a manager. No preseason, no time between games, trying to implement a different style and all that sort of stuff. So for him, I don't know whether he would refuse the job on that basis. Clearly not. So you kind of are where you are for his point of view. You've got to give him some time on the training pitch. But at the same time, I'm not of the view that you just ignore all these games that you're saying, just forget these games, because momentum and understanding the context and everything matters. You can't just, for example, the Swansea game, it's kind of like you can't just say this totally doesn't matter, because you've got to understand and appreciate that half the fan base, or probably 90% of the fan base, did not really think Ange was a good appointment, did they? Let's face it, like nobody was really calling for him. So you can't then go into those games and just ignore that and say, well, I'm just going to do whatever I want, even if we end up losing 3-2, because that just amps up the heat, doesn't it? That just ramps it up. And obviously the same thing then happening at Betis to some extent. And I just think you can't ignore all that. The momentum and everything, it infects the players, it infects the crowd. And that's part of the manager's job, is to think, all right, okay, we've got something here. Let's just deliver that. And that's what I'm saying about that team selection against Sunderland, is it's kind of like, that game mattered so much in the context of where Ange is as a manager in the eyes of Forest fans, that was it actually a good decision to sort of play some untested players and bring Dominguez in and all that? Is it the kind of game where you think, well, get Ryan Yates on because he's a guy that will potentially get the crowd going and get people on side, and it's a Sunderland team that he should be able to cope with. He's dealt with tougher teams in the past and done what like there's just ways of going about it, and I feel like he's struggling to find that way that will win fans around at the minute, regardless of obviously the timescales and things. But where we are now, who else is going to come in realistically? Who else are we going to get at this stage anyway, even if that was even on the table? And I sort of think we potentially also underestimate how much emphasis is on the Europa League, and how much actually we might be focusing on these Europa League games as being the be all and end all at this point of the season, to make sure that we're in a position where we can qualify and try and obviously then bring some league form into it. But it's going to be, it could be a very horrible few weeks with the fixtures we've got, certainly, or it could be a Nuno-esque surprise win at Newcastle that completely changes everything. I hope it's the latter one.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it is kind of entering a little bit of the unknown as to what's going to happen, because it feels like we are just a few converted chances away from that first win, and we've been talking about that. And Ange Postecoglou himself said after the match in the BBC Sport, irrespective of the lineup we put out there, we've done enough to win the game, and we've done enough to win the last 4 games, to be honest. That's a direct quote from Ange Postecoglou. And it feels like... Say again?
Do you think he said that at Spurs as well, though, after they lost?
You took the words out of my mouth.
I mean?
I was about to say that is almost a carbon copy of something he would have said last year. And so therefore you start to think, well, look, is there something about the man and the style of his play that is just going to follow him around when it gets to this kind of level of football, Paul, where you play, or you are the manager of Spurs in the Premier League? A lot of my Spurs friends I've spoken to extensively have said the first 10 games of that first season are the reason why they finished 5th, because they had a really fantastic start. They had a pretty okay-ish middle that kind of helped sustain them in a position, and they had a really bad end to the season, which followed over into last year when they ended up finishing 17th. And whether he jettisoned the league, it felt like he did, in favour of the Europa or not. It's now he's come to Forest, and we're putting these performances in. We can't put a 90-minute performance in. We're getting 45 minutes at best out of him in terms of amazing football at Betis in the first half, and the Swansea in moments, and Burnley and yesterday. But is that possibly symptomatic of him? And are we focusing too much on the man as well? I mean, I've made a big fuss about the Australians coming on board, and I've made a big fuss about, is it great? And we've got all these people coming. Well, actually, maybe Ange should be kind of connecting with the people in Nottingham. Maybe Ange should be focusing on Ryan Yates, like Dan said, and getting him in the team and saying, well, actually, I need your guts and your drive and your captaincy right here, right now, against the likes of Sunderland. You're on mute now, I think, buddy. No, you've lost you. Can I hear you? Can you hear him?
No, it might be a connection issue. That it's a bit jumpy. For
just lost Paul Morley for the moment. But let him try and work that out. So yeah, I mean, I was just suggesting that.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now. So yeah, brilliant. So yeah, I was just suggesting, is it time for Ryan Yates to be given more of a role in these kind of matches?
Yeah, no, I heard everything you said. So much to say. I mean, Yates, or just on Yates. I think Dan's call about Yates ahead of Dominguez on Saturday is perfectly valid, particularly in the absence of Luiz, who looks like a real player, by the way, and I hope we keep him fit. I think if we manage to keep Douglas Luiz fit or get him back to fitness, then he's going to be key to any kind of success we have this season. I think we saw enough of that in the game and a half that we've seen him. Yates. I always said Yates has got a role to play. I think he might well start against Mitchell, and particularly if Luiz is not fit to come back in. So I think again we've got to. Again, I'm much like you. I think the Arsenal and Swansea games, I almost kind of don't put any stock in, because I think that was Ange's mini pre-season that he had to get a look at every player. He used those two games to get at least 23 players. I think got 45 minutes each in those two games, and then we judge him from there onwards. In which we've got an okay result at Burnley, a good result at Betis, and ultimately a very disappointing one against Sunderland. So, look, I think whatever Ange did or didn't do at Spurs is kind of irrelevant now. I don't see much sort of value in harping back to that. He's not a Spurs manager anymore; he's a Forest manager. So we need to concentrate on what he does here. He's ultimately going to be judged on results, and I think this comment about that we probably could have won the last 4 games, I think we could all probably agree with that. I think he generally has a point, and it comes back to what I said before. We've had chances in all of those games where 6-7 times out of 10, the ball goes in the back of the net. We've managed to convert 1, 2, or 3 of those. And how much can he control? Can he control Callum Hudson-Odoi scuffing it onto the post on Wednesday night? Can he control Chris Wood missing that header? He's getting his players to put the ball in the right place. His players are in the right place. They've ultimately got to put the ball in the back of the net. So, but I also do get there's only so long that you can kind of make that excuse and create that narrative. One thing I would say, and just about Sunderland in particular, it's the first game that we've had on the back of an away European game in the middle of the week. And everyone said at the start of the season, this is going to be interesting to see how we manage this, right? And we will certainly not be the first team in the last 3 or 4 years who, particularly having their first season in Europe, to go away midweek, travel away. If you think we flew back we must have flown back Thursday, therefore, which means we probably had Friday training and then we're into the game on Saturday. This time last year, had we had that Sunderland game on the Saturday evening, we'd have had 7 days to prepare for it. This time we've effectively had 1. So we shouldn't lose sight of that. That's not me making an excuse for not winning yesterday or losing yesterday, but it's something we must take into consideration. And the same will be the case against Newcastle. Now, arguably for Newcastle, they have a game in midweek as well. They've got a Champions League game. Again, they're at home on Sunday, but we're at home in the midweek, so it kind of cancels out. We can train straight away Friday and Saturday for Newcastle. So. I just think from Ange's point of view, I view it that we've had 3 games under him properly, where he's had had an opportunity to influence what happens in an important game. 1 okay result, 1 decent result at Betis, and 1 crap result at home against Sunderland. And Thursday's the next one up. And I think it's important and positive for us, as much as we talk about the challenge of playing Thursday, Sunday, or midweek games. This is a week where we need a midweek game because we need to get Saturday out of our system pretty quickly. So to be able to focus on Midtjylland and not stew on the Sunderland result and worry about what's going to happen to us at Newcastle. I'm thankful we've got this Midtjylland game on Thursday that everyone can start focusing on pretty quickly in the next couple of days. Hopefully, fingers crossed, get a good result there. And then, who knows what that might bring and what confidence that might breed into Sunday. And we could possibly get some at Newcastle. But even if we don't, if you tell me right now, if we win 2-0 on Thursday and lose 2-1 next Sunday, I would class that as an okay week, because Newcastle is a bloody difficult place to go. I know they lost today, and again, how much is that going to feed into what they're feeling ahead of next week? As I say, they've got a midweek game. I'm not quite sure who they're playing, but if we can just get a win on Thursday, that would make such a difference to the feeling. And I think that would then buy him time. I think if we did have a good win and a good performance on Thursday, people might then say, okay, Newcastle's a difficult game. If we end up losing 2-1 at Newcastle and we put in a decent performance, then again, everyone will maybe forgive that a little bit, although it would leave the league position looking a bit precarious. But it is only 7 games in, or would be only 7 games in, so plenty of time to sort of to put that right. So for me, the focus should be on Thursday. We should try as quickly as we can to forget about yesterday. And let's all try and be positive and focus on getting a positive result on Thursday, and let that feed through, particularly if you go in and you're in the stands. Like give as much as you've got, give the positivity so that it feeds through to the players and the managers to get a good result on Thursday.
Yeah, I think it's really important that we stick together, because ultimately we're down in 17th, but it is still really early in the season. I keep saying that we're a win and a draw, or a couple of wins away from actually catapulting ourselves out of that area and back up a little bit. So it is early days still. We've been joined by Forest Fan TV and Wolfie, and there's been a raid going on with everyone coming in, and the Ange in, Ange out thing, we're not even discussing Ange out, because I think that's just bonkers, guys. So if any of you are Ange out at this stage, then you're entitled to your opinion. And I always say, guys, you can have that opinion. My opinion is that would just be the wrong move at the moment. We've had enough turmoil already this season. We don't need to start changing our manager off the back of what effectively is a couple of defeats, really. The Arsenal defeat. The West Ham defeat was a Nuno defeat, so they can't count that one. We've had another defeat in the Premier League yesterday against a good Sunderland team, to be fair. They've come up and they're getting in amongst it. You should have seen them if you didn't see them at home against Aston Villa with 10 men. So, we've got to kind of try and keep our heads balanced. I know that people are getting very emotive, and we talked about that at the start of the episode, and Laurie thinks he's right. That's why this is Talking Reds, not Ranting Reds. Ranting Reds... Panting Reds, maybe that would be a whole.
Apparently, we need a spin-off called Ranting Reds now.
Ranting Reds.
We could just,
I think we do. Maybe. I want to we've got a few minutes left, and we have gone over time. We always do. I think, and I want your guys' opinion on this as well. I touched on this off air. I think that Ange is getting the microscope on him at this stage more than another manager would, because it's Ange, because of what happened with him at Spurs and the things that he said about always been something in the second season, and the way that he did seem to jettison the league and then go for the Europa, and whatever happened, he's kind of carrying a little bit of baggage with him potentially, and I feel like that the disrespect he gets is quite evident. I wonder if another manager had come in, not Ange Postecoglou, Jose Mourinho, for example. There's a name that people are saying. We could have gone and got Jose. Let's say Jose had come in and he'd had a similar or identical start, Richard Spray. Would everyone be calling for Jose's head as well? If it was Iraola that had come from Bournemouth with the record he's had there, let's remember he took 10 games, I think, to get a win at Bournemouth. If it was Iraola who'd come in, if we'd headhunted him and he'd had an identical start, Marco Silva, if he'd come in and had an identical start, would he be under the same microscope pressure as Ange Postecoglou? Would everyone be saying Iraola out, Jose out, etc., etc.? Do you think?
It's hard to prove one way or the other, isn't it? Because I've also heard people tell me, well, if we got those guys in, this wouldn't be happening. But I don't think you can say that with any more certainty. So I think there's a bit of that. I think there's sort of a bias because of the stigma that comes with Ange. I mean, Paul's right. You got to be careful about how much you hold people quote unquote pass sins and don't allow them to progress as managers. Just like if we all kind of threw in the towel on certain individuals before a few bad games, then there'd be half of our team wouldn't be playing and they'd be off somewhere else. I mean, if you look at Chris Wood's situation, and we would have his first few matches or appearances with Forest, you probably wouldn't ever expect him to be where he is, as we've said. I mean, I just think it's like I said, it's a compounding effect. And so even if another person's name is at the top of who's creating that team sheet, maybe we feel a little bit much the same, because it's a compounding effect, as I mentioned, from other events that have occurred prior to that have got us all a little out of sorts and off kilter. But I do think there's some Ange bias because of the kind of personality, and some of that's on him because of the way that he operated at the end of his tenure with Tottenham. But like Paul said, again, I know it's just me being a little bit repetitive. I think you've got to be careful about being too quick to judge anyone in those kinds of situations. Because he did win a trophy, and I know he's going to keep bringing that up probably, or at least other people bring it up. And I can't think a resume for a club is not made in a handful of matches. It's made over a period of time with enough time to as I said, to put your stamp on the team, to develop your culture. It's the same thing with Nuno. I mean, we all gave him the benefit of the doubt in relation to the fact that he didn't get a chance to have a preseason. He didn't get a chance to, infuse his culture into the situation. And so I know it's a bit different. The dynamics are slightly different with this, but it's just, you're still coming off of a guy that we loved and that who did so much for us as a club prior to with Cooper. So there's some comparisons, but yeah, I think his name in being involved has some bearing on it. Maybe it wears us, it makes it a little less patient because of what we know about him, because it was so glaring when he was at Tottenham. But I again, we'll come back to it. I just don't think it's enough time, period.
It's also that as a Forest fan, our frame of reference for this scenario, which is where you've got a manager that's done okay, and then you kind of lose them a bit out of the blue and you don't know, like our frame of reference is purely the Steve McLaren replacing Billy Davies and Alex McLeish replacing Sean O'Driscoll. I can't think of any other scenarios where we've kind of been in this situation, and both of those ended terribly. And it almost feels like, because that's our frame of reference, there's a little bit of obviously almost expecting
PTSD
going to happen
thing
again.
Well,
because
people talk about new manager bounce is what people are saying, but normally new manager bounce comes when a team they're appointed because the team has lost 6 or 7 games in a row, and actually you can't get much worse. So anything is a positive, Whereas I know we didn't have a great end to last season, but Ange's coming in really on with a club in a on a riding a bit of a crest wave. Right, there was the West Ham game, and there was the sort of hoo-ha around his Nuno's departure. But by and large, he's coming into a successful club. Most managers take over teams that are doing shit, and it's very easy to kind of get one result and it instantly flips the narrative. So I think new manager bounce in this scenario is not really not that relevant. I want to go on record as saying I'm definitely not somebody who is an Ange apologist. I'm not here saying that he's going to be brilliant and he was a great appointment. He wasn't my first choice, second choice, or my third choice, but I think it's still possible to have that view of, okay, so I wouldn't have chosen him myself, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I want him to fail. Right. I don't want to be I'm not in the camp that, I think there's too many people out there who have been banging that drum and saying, right, well, I told you so. And it doesn't get us anywhere. We might as well try and hope the guy succeeds, because it's in all of our best interest that he does. If he fails and he gets relegated, if he gets fired and we end up having a relegation battle for the rest of the season, that's in no one's interest at all. We're all going to be grumpy as FUCK for the rest of the season if that's the case. You can say something. Right. Well, you referenced Iraola there, and you're right. He I think he got 3 points from his first 9 games, and I'm pretty sure I said this earlier today on X. I can't think of another, prior to this sort of Nuno Ange changeover, of another Premier League club making a managerial appointment that represents such a shift in style as this does, from O'Neill to Iraola, and he won.
Unai Emery is the one that stands out to me though, because that Villa team was struggling under Steven Gerrard, and he came in and he
Yeah, but again, he was
implemented his high line and all that, and then he took them right up
that's
straight
the
away,
point.
and they never
Forest
really
haven't
looked back.
But that's the point. Forest haven't been struggling under Nuno. But Iraola took 10 games to get his first. He got 3 points in his first 9 games. Everyone was saying, "Who the hell is this guy? You know, what have Bournemouth done getting rid of O'Neill? And look at him now." So I'm not suggesting that's going to happen with Ange. And I'm going to use another one, which I get is a completely different era, completely different context, but it's relevant to Forest, right? And Brian Clough came in 1975, and I think you've got a graphic. His first 30, he won his first game against Fulham, and he went 12 games without a win then. And then he ended up winning, and then it was up to the end of the season. He won 3 games out of 17 in his first season. And thank Christ, like there was no such thing as social media in 1975, right? Otherwise, God knows where we'd be right now. So again, I wouldn't dare to compare Ange with Clough. It's a completely different era, completely different context. But it just demonstrates that actually, just sometimes need to give these things a bit of time. But I similarly, having said that, ultimately do absolutely get people who want things and expect things quicker, because we live in that world now where everything is instant gratification. I said this before, I said this the other day. So I get that point of view. I just personally have a slightly different take on it. I think it will take time. I'm not going to give him in an infinite amount of time, because clearly if we keep losing games, something will have to change eventually. But I think we're just way too early in the piece. As I said, 3 really games that you can pin on him as being definite Ange influence games, which is Burnley, Betis and Sunderland. 1 okay result, 1 decent one, 1 crap one. And let's see what happens on Thursday.
Fantastic. Andrew Crowe is with us. He says that every ground in the Prem is a tough place to go. Every team in the Prem is a tough team to get a result against. We need to flip that narrative back, so teams are saying that about us. Gordon says, let's cut the crap. Ange needs to go tonight. I'm going to put some of your comments up, whether I agree with them or I don't. Crazy Cat Lady says, Ange out. Cash Talks Football says, that's in, out was the raid call. Oh, lol, that was to do with something else. Paul says, let's wait until we get relegated, and it's too late. Ilmatic says, Sunderland are 5th in the table currently. They are indeed. They're doing very well. Let's not forget that. John Thompson says, Ange is a winner. Only losers wouldn't want Ange. Well, we've all got different opinions. We all want the best thing for our club. Pat Brett says, I'm not an Ange Ball fan, but I hope he does well for our club. Gordon, again, is quite vocal in the comments as well. You know, he wants Ange to go respectfully now, please. I just don't see it happening. I wonder, Gordon, did you want Ange in the first place? You know, let's bear that in mind. A lot of you are now thinking, I want Ange out massively, but maybe you weren't Ange people in the first place. I don't know. So look, we're out of time, guys. We've gone quite a little bit over. It's an emotive subject when you talk about football, when you talk about your club. Off the back of losing a game that you really kind of thought when the fixtures came out that we would be picking points up. We go away to Burnley, and I thought 3 points on the board at home Sunderland. I thought another 3 points. Just goes to show that it's not as easy as that. So look, Danscape, anything final? You look like you got something on the tip of your tongue you want to say. So I'm going to give you final thoughts.
I did. I've forgotten now. The chat's moved on. I think there was something there. Everything's moved on. It's gone. Look, we've got to give it a bit more time, but at the same, it was very depressing at the ground yesterday watching that performance. It felt it had that inevitability about it, unfortunately. And I just think at some point we have got to snap out of it, and that includes play. It's everything. It's everything about the club at the minute. Injuries are popping up that we didn't have, and players are out of form, and all that. Some of that does fall on the manager, right? I said when Nuno left, the biggest example of what Nuno delivered was the fact he took Chris Wood from the guy no one wanted to start to the guy that was the most clinical guy in the league. And since Ange's come in, it's gone back the other way, right? So there is something about getting the results over the line that does fall on the manager. So he has to find a way of instilling that in the players over these next few games to make sure that this doesn't carry on.
Pat Brett also says Sunderland are not a good side. Everyone was saying that about Nottingham Forest last season, Pat Brett, when we were sitting 3rd in the table for most of it. So, I hear you, but there's more than one way to skin a cat. There's more than one way to win a football match. At the moment, they're doing that and we're not. Paul, you always pop up at the end with just one more thing, so I'm going to give you that chance now.
Well, I just said Sunderland got a point at Palace the other week, which Liverpool couldn't manage the other day. So, I mean, they're not that bad a team. Yeah, I don't want to, for the sake of... I mean, look, Ange has been, I think, he is the most divisive managerial appointment that I can remember at Forest. And we just, like I say, just need to try, I'm trying as possible, as hard as I can, not to be too reactive. And it's really difficult. It is really difficult. And I totally get people that are frustrated, are angry. I come to what Dan said about, and you pick up on a comment you said about how the mood in the ground just felt frustrating. I think, as much as the players are failing, the manager might be failing. I think we're failing as well. I think we absolutely have a duty to play. And people will say, well, it's on the players to get the fans up. And I think it's a two-way street. I honestly think that the constant negativity is not going to do us any good, right? Whatever you think of Ange, back the players, try and get vocal, be vocal. Everyone's going to be needed on Thursday night. Every 9,000 Forest fans there on Thursday are going to be needed to get behind the players, get behind the manager. It's going to be the same in the next home game against Chelsea after the international break. It's going to be the same for the 3,000 odd whoever that are going to Newcastle. And I must say this, in Seville, I was really grateful and thankful to be in Seville and had a brilliant time there. Every single Forest fan that I spoke to, not one of them, not a single one, was in the Ange out camp. So I don't know whether that's just a consequence of everyone being on a high, being away, being in Seville. And I'm talking about before the game. This is not after the good performance that we saw. But even before the game, everybody was minded to say, look, let's give this guy a chance. And I just wonder if we read too much into the sort of the X brigade and actually and this is not to put people down, because I understand that certain people don't have a chance to go to matches, and X is their way to view things and their way to put comment across, and I totally appreciate that. But it does feel like there's a slight difference in the regular hardcore match going fans versus the online brigade. But that then almost contradicts what Dan was saying, in that the mood in the ground was flat.
That's partly because of the opposition, though. I find that the mood in the ground is, if we're underdogs, it's amazing, and we need a game like that so that we're the underdogs.
So what you're saying is we've got entitlement creeping, and that word's been used a bit.
But we've got. I don't think it's specific to this season. It was like that when we got promoted. I remember the Bournemouth game when we got promoted, where we lost 3-2. It felt like it there, and I think it's when you're playing that equal team, you're waiting for the team to give you something. Whereas when you're underdogs, everyone, I think, is already in that kind of frame of mind a bit more.
Yeah. No, I get that to a degree, but I think we could do. But I think we all can do more. That's what
we can. No, you're right. We can. Quick comment from Dave Red Dog. He says players do not want to play for Ange. Not sure about that, mate. I think maybe you're looking at it through your own lens there. I haven't seen that at all. I wouldn't say at all that the players don't want to play for Ange. There's no evidence to support that. I think you're just saying that because it suits your narrative that you want Ange out, if I'm being perfectly honest with you.
I think we were there on Seville on Wednesday, the first night, for the first half. If you want any evidence that players want to play for Ange, you just watch that first 45 minutes. That's your answer.
100%. I'm not subscribing to that at all. We've gone way over. I'm going to have to close it there. Rich, I normally come to you right at the very end. I know you've got loads to say, but we're going to be back to do a Michelin preview in a couple of days' time, and we'll be continuing the Ange conversation. Please do like and subscribe for us. Anyone that's not subscribed yet, please do jump on board and help us push our numbers up as well. We're on all the social media channels, X and Twitter. X is Twitter. Twitter, you know what it is. Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, all the usual places. My voice is going. I'm going to end this podcast now before we end up doing 2 hours. Thank you very much for being with us. This is Talking Reds. We'll see you soon. Congestion.
join Greg and Richard right here on Talking Red.